but I was kind of, Charles didn't really realize this, but I was transitioning to become like a vegan. And he would kind of insist on putting the egg on top of the pancakes. And I said, Charles, I really don't, that doesn't appeal to me at all. But he'd say, but it's better this way. And that was the funny thing about Charles. He just tended to think the things that he liked were just intrinsically better in that particular way. It was just a funny kind of quirk of his. And yeah, I just have wonderful memories of him. He came all the way to Brussels, like Doug explained earlier, to the bar mitzvah of my son. And it was wonderful to have him there during the week when all of my family was there. And again, he came to the wedding when I got married to Minette in Maine in 2012. He came up and he videotaped the wedding for me as a wedding gift. And he just, I guess I didn't realize that he was so sick. And for the past several years, I hadn't been very much in touch with him because I was sick, and then I've been really, really busy with graduate school. But I didn't realize he was sick, and I wish I had, been able to see him and visit him in the hospital. But if you're listening, Charles, and I'm sure you are somehow, I really love you, and I really miss you. And you were a great, great friend. Thanks.
Okay, I guess back to me. Thanks, Rob. So Charles was our family genealogist and historian. During these past 9 weeks, I've wanted to pick up the phone so many times to ask him about a photo or something I found in his apartment, like the tree branch and the Coke can sculpture. But that doesn't go anywhere, does it? Once while he was traveling in Italy, he stopped into a bar in the town that our paternal ancestors were from, and he ordered a glass of wine in Italian. And the bartender noticed his accent and asked him where he's from. And Charles replied, and this was totally baiting the bartender in a setup. He said, well, I live in New York City, but my ancestors are from Italy. And the bartender asked him, where in Italy? And Charles replied, well, the name over the front door of this establishment is my great, great, great grandfather. Really? So the bartender made a phone call, and soon after, people began arriving. And the place filled up, and they were asking questions and telling stories about our ancestors. And Charles actually pulled out a paper copy of our family tree, and they all began filling in the branches, asking questions about those who had immigrated to America. I believe Charles was the very first Ancestry.com. If only we had all stopped to think about the possibilities. He told me he had planned to stay only one day in the 2 nights that surrounded that full day, but he had been invited to so many dinners in so many homes, he stayed a whole week. And I've always believed that you haven't really traveled to a country until you've been invited into someone's home and been served a local home-cooked meal. He loved living in New York, but he also loved wintering in the Dominican Republic, maybe even more. In New York, he loved to entertain. Dinner parties inspired him to create meals for everyone to enjoy. He looked forward to visiting Yankee Stadium at least once each season. I think more, but at least once. He went to the theater often, and he was a true movie buff. If anyone would be interested in his best movies by decade, 1920 through 1970, or his top 500 movies of all time, or my favorite, his top 17 worst movies of all time, be in touch. I can send the list. And yes, he kept lists. He kept lots of lists. Top 25 smartest people I know of comes to mind. I didn't make that list. But I am on the top 25 list of funniest people that he knew. I'm not sure, but I think he was just throwing me a bone because he knew one day I would see all these lists. He was busy writing his memoirs for the past few years, which I had the privilege and pleasure of reading while they were under development. He wrote about relatives, friends, places, sports, his New Paltz mayoral campaign, Obama's campaign, influences, Jeopardy, life decisions, and more. It's a real slideshow of his life, and I'm looking forward to, because I have them all now, going through them. Our third speaker today is Jim Trombetta. Jim and Chuck were high school friends. I don't believe they were particularly close at the time, but they did have a lot of contact. I know they worked on the yearbook together, and I think over the years the bonds of their friendship grew. Jim?
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see me or hear me? I don't really know.
We can both see and hear you.
Okay. Well, now you're stuck. So, yeah, I was just wrote something last night about Chuck, and I thought that what I realized was that he was like the institutional memory of our class, and basically all the people in it that he could give the history of what they had done, what they were doing, and what they had done with him, at different times. And yeah, we were in that yearbook together. I remember that really well. And but the thing is, and I wasn't sure about his video work. I wasn't that aware of it. But what I did know was that our last chat, he wanted to write, he said, due to having mastered, what do we call it? Due to having mastered, wood, or, he had finally mastered word processing. That's what he had told me. And that suddenly, that made it easier for him to write in a way that in my world, it had come to making it more difficult to work on stuff. But anyway, he had this idea for a movie he wanted to make. And he was with a friend of his who had come up with a treatment for the movie, which I thought was really good and was very possibly very successful potentially. I remember reading that and, kind of cheering him up about it a little bit. And I hope that, I don't know. So I wrote a whole thing about this. I can't see it on here, but that he had worked on this treatment, and I thought it was very good. I mean, in a sense, but it was unbalanced between being funny and being serious. Now, I thought that there was something there that if he had come at it continually, and he had a collaborator, I believe, and I don't know who that was, that they could do this thing probably pretty well if he kept at it like that. But what the thing is that what I was just about to say, kind of finish up, was that because Chuck knew so much about our own histories as they went back, I might have been a little more interested maybe to find out about his own personal history, which I wish I had known more about. I don't know what his family life was like. I mean, you may know that. Or what he had worked on before that, or who he was in that historical dimension. And I feel like I missed something there that I wish he could have told us a little more about. And I guess that's really, I don't really have a lot more to say, but I mean, he used to call me up all the time, sort of out of the blue, when we would have a discussion about God knows what. It was, you know. So anyway, that's kind of my experience of him, and that's my experience of him, and I wish I'd had more. Let's say, okay.
Thanks, Jim. And your impersonation of Kilroy was spot on. Okay. I believe I know the transcript the movie script you're talking about, and I believe he was working. Oh, my video has stopped. Start my video. Okay, here I am. Sorry about that. I believe it was something to do with cowboys and Indians, and I'll tell you just a quick bit. Charles and I had two fabulous parents and a host of other fabulous relatives. Our dad started the Little League with a few other people, took a trip down to Williamsburg, I believe it was, came back with all the paraphernalia and information needed, and he and a few other noted local artslands went up and built McDowell Field with their own hands. It was one of the first baseball fields around to have really cool dugouts for the kids to be in when they were playing. And he was, I moved away, but he was close, and he was hugely close with our dad, and even more close with our mom, who was a school teacher in Ardsley for 35 years. We were blessed with them. They gave us enough rope to hang ourselves, and somehow we didn't quite do that, although there are stories. So maybe that answers a little bit of what you were asking about. So back to my little script here. In the DR, he enjoyed the company of local friends. Some were native to Boca Chica, a small town outside of Santo Domingo, and others who had migrated from Europe and other parts unknown. Shared his opinions freely, imagine that. And in fact, one of the stories I heard, he helped a local restaurant make some improvements that caused them to become quite popular. He also shared his resources. To many of the local friends, he appeared quite wealthy, and I suppose, based on our different economical lives, he was. He was generous. He helped one young Dominican woman make her way through medical school, and today she's a doctor. He helped others to purchase a vehicle or put food on their tables. Up until a month before passing, he was tutoring two young women who are now ages 15 and 10, practically every day to improve their English, which he knew and strongly believed would improve their lives. He used songs. He and I would search for English language songs that worked in Spanish, and they would use those songs in their daily lessons to help them not just learn English, but to understand it. I've been asked to step in with these young women and continue the language lessons, and I'm going to try. Okay. Chicas, pronto empezamos. In the DR, he also employed local women to clean, do laundry, prepare fresh food, and more. He didn't need all of those services. He felt he was helping out. He contributed to other friends who would visit with him each day or week, drive him places when he needed a ride or whatever. I know one of his friends came by each morning for coffee, and they would sit and talk. And my brother really liked that. He spoke of it often. And when he hired local people, he often paid more than what would be the asking price, because again, he was feeling he was helping, and it wasn't beyond his reach. He was generous. I've seen the list that he kept, another list of how he financially helped so many different people. I'm really proud of my brother. I've been touched by the outreach from his friends in the DR, offering their condolences and telling me what a wonderful friend. He also helped local friends with loans, financial gifts, gifts of his time and his talents, all of which were many. I actually have a check in my possession for $500 from a friend paying him back for a loan. My brother never cashed the check. It's dated 1981. And I don't know the reason, but I know it has to be a generous one. Catherine, would you turn on Let's see. Who was that? Would you pick? Who is it we're going to talk to now? I'm afraid I've lost the list.
You had Mikhail Horowitz next.
Right, but I want to interject somebody before Mikhail. I'd asked you to put.
Sure. Was it Lauren declined to speak? I invited them, but they said no, thank you. But I think maybe David Moskowitz. Was that who you?
David, would you like to say something now?
I'll ask him to unmute. I just sent him a request.
Okay.
Sure. Sure. Be happy to.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Hear you.
Should I turn my video on?
Would you?
You should have gotten a request. There you are.
Wow. I'm trying to think of so many stories are flooding over me. I knew Charles primarily mid 80s through the 90s. I was at a film school in the mid 80s and was working some post-production companies just to get my film career started. And that's where I met Charles, and we did a lot of work together. And then as I went back into serious film production, he just, we maintained a friendship for years. We were on a shoot once. I remember this. We were on a shoot once somewhere, and we were out at night having some beverages, and we were talking about two things. We were talking about travel, which we both love to do a lot of, and Charles was probably the most extensive traveler I knew. And we were talking about women. And Charles used to always tell me the proper way to travel. And we got into this whole conversation about when you travel, going down the side road. And maybe it was the alcohol, but he got very philosophical, as he would sometimes warrant in talking to a younger man. And he gave me this whole speech about how when you're traveling with a woman, you have to know that she'll support you in going down the side road. Because at the end of the day, what's down that special side road? Probably nothing, but there might be something amazing. And you need to know when you make the decision to take the two of you off the main road down this hidden side road, that if you find nothing, she won't recriminate you. And when you find a woman like that, then that's the woman for you. And it came to my mind because several years later, I was married. I think I was married a year or two, and we're on vacation up in the Pacific Northwest, and we're driving around, and we're up sort of in the northern Olympic Peninsula, and we're driving. It was a beautiful day, and we saw a side road, and we decided to go down that side road. And we drove about 20 minutes down this little windy road. And after 25 minutes, we came to a clearing, and it opened up, and there was just an amazing view of the Olympic Mountains and northern Puget Sound. And on this little finger of land was 6 yurts. And somebody came out of one of the yurts and saw us. People didn't obviously go down that road often, and they motioned for us to come. And we spent like an hour sitting with these people we just met on this, having hot cocoa. It was a cold day. And they brought out some brandy, and we met like half a dozen cool people sitting out there looking at the Olympic Mountains in Puget Sound. That we had found. And I couldn't wait to get back and to call Charles and tell him about my adventure down the side road and the afternoon spent in this little community of yurts looking at the Olympic Mountains. And he was, I think he was very proud of me that I had done that. I have a lot of stories about Charles, but that's the one that came to my mind.
Well, thank you. That was good. So my turn again. Well, we just had a request about learning a little more about his run for mayor, and I think Mikhail will be able to pick up on that, but I'll start. He loved and remembered his time in New Paltz, and there we go. I have to find my words because I'd never remember this. He ran on the Lawn Party, kind of a reference to grass, back in 1971, and he lost. He wanted to get more people involved in local government. He wanted to get more of the old Huguenot regime thinking. And he's always wanted more people to be more involved. It was a passion of his. He also participated in the purchase of a New Paltz area commune. He had a small share in a local movie theater. He worked at Lake Minnewaska for years. And he's always just loved the time that he spent in New Paltz. He made friends there who have been lifelong friends. Many are here today. And I believe one of you is joining us from a cruise ship that's just off the shores of the Azores right now. I hope you were able to make it in. And I know that we have people from all over the world, all around the globe. Let's see, how about we let Lawrence jump in and speak? Lawrence, start speaking.
I just sent you a request to unmute. You should be able to.
Hi, hopefully you can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, there
Yes.
you are.
Okay. So I wrote something, but I haven't read it through. So you'll bear with me if I don't get it right. I had so much to say, and I wanted to try to organize it right. But the first thing I want to say is how much I love and will miss Charles. Just people have said all sorts of things that I recognize Charles so clearly, and just so generous and full of ideas and ways of supporting. And my mother and I were speaking before this call, and we were saying how Charles was really like family. That he was committed to his friends at the level of a family member, and just lifelong, very genuine, selfless commitment to his friends. So anyway, I'll read a little bit. It seems like I always knew Charles. He was one of the constellation of grown-ups orbiting my childhood in the chaotic hippie scene of New Paltz in the 70s. And he was part of the globe-trotting, gig-doing video crowd of the 80s, friends of my dad. While he ran with the eccentrics, I don't think he himself qualified. He was far more together, practical and pragmatic, the facilitator, the social glue, opinionator, and source of enthusiasm for all sorts of fun things, but not nuts, like many of those he ran with at the time. I really got to know Charles well when I moved to New York City about 30 years ago. He rented his spare room to a long list of friends, and I was among them. He had an apartment on 104th Street, and he had a great deal on that. He was a proxy for the absentee super, and he rented it out to me and my 2 feral rescue kittens, despite his feelings about cats. That apartment had a picture on the wall that my father had drawn, and literally on the wall. So that Charles liked to tell the story of how my dad walked into the apartment seeing a fresh coat of paint and took out a pencil and drew an enormous portrait of Charles, his face, floor to ceiling, and a sombrero. It was fantastic. Charles turned out to be a really wonderful roommate. He was a great cook, and I still remember that chicken piccata. He had endless entertaining stories, and he was a thoughtful problem solver on all fronts. As for the cooking lessons, I never did master the proper knuckle tuck for speed chopping vegetables, I think to his consternation, and he questioned the cost benefits of my use of tinfoil.
There it is, all right.
I was recuperating from an illness and starting a new life, and Charles offered a safe and homey base and really wonderful friendship at that time. And then all through the years afterwards, so once you're Charles's friend, you're always his friend. And he's always was ready to talk, to provide advice, to connect with a gig, share a skill. And also he reached out to me when it was most needed. When my father died and left me with an enormous video library, Charles took it on himself to digitize and preserve some of the core works. When I lost my husband, he showed up to help me with the dreary task of clearing a storage unit. He wielded a tennis racket, which he had really impressive talents with in other At other times, he used it as a hammer to disassemble some modular shelving. So these are just a few little things I wanted to say. I just also, I had a couple of other things that I didn't write down, but that one was that when he passed, I had consistently this very funny image of him zipping gleefully on a Vespa through the entire world with this amazing broad view that he would have loved because he was a broad thinker. So whatever vantage point he may have now, I'm sure that he seemed very enthusiastic about it. And the other thought I had was that about that picture that was drawn on the wall. He liked to tell also after he left that apartment that the picture, they tried painting over the picture and it reemerged over who knows how many coats of paint. They could not get rid of that picture. And I feel that that's sort of a perfect metaphor, just that Charles's gleeful face will be with us always, just imagining his joy for life and the kindnesses that he brought to all of us.
Well, thank you very much. I believe this might be the picture.
Hold on one second.
Yep. Well, when I'm speaking, you can see it. This came right off of the Uptown wall. And now I know the backstory because I didn't remember. So there you go. And, I'm going to add, he opened his apartment up to so many people. And he and I laughed not too long ago about not knowing how many keys to his apartment were floating around the world. And the rule of the house was, if when I was visiting, oftentimes I would visit when he was traveling and then go to see our mother and make sure that she was being well taken care of. We only locked the deadbolt when we were inside, and no one ever got the deadbolt key, right? So if you were inside, you were safe. Nobody was walking in on you. And that was great. Thank you very much. That was really awesome. Really appreciate it. Okay, back to me. So Charles and I we had an unbelievable relationship. We took no shit from each other. We argued, we debated, one of his very favorite things to do. In fact, we would debate on a subject and he would say, well, you pick this, which side do you want to be on? I'll take the other side. We discussed things, we agreed, we disagreed, we shared, but mostly I'm going to remember forever that being, apart from my wife, Deborah, my most loyal confidant, and of course, his generosity towards me and my family. I know I'm going to miss him until the day I die, and maybe even longer. I'd like to share two stories before we bring on our last speaker. These are favorites of his. One is the subject of a memoir. And while I'm doing this, I want to change the background that you're seeing me speak to. There's one. You only get to see part of it. I worked for a major book publishing company for many years. And among the many useless titles that we published each year, we recreated a series of books under the banner of Legacy Publishing. The books were each called Chronicles of their subject. The picture you're seeing now is the Chronicle of African-American struggle for freedom, this Civil Rights Chronicle. And we also did the 60s Chronicle, and there were several others, but I'm speaking only to these two. Each of them ran just under 500 pages and had over 1,000 historical photographs. We hired renowned writers, authors, historians, and some who simply lived the experience to construct the books. And our internal editors were just exceptional at formatting and creating them. For the Civil Rights Chronicle, we hired Myrlie Evers Williams, the widow of slain civil rights activist Medgar Evers, to write the foreword. I took Myrlie on a New York press junket. we met we went with at a couple of colleges with students and faculty. We were able to hook up an interview on CBS Morning Show with Howard K. Smith and with the AP News Syndicate. So it went out over 112 radio stations and newspapers all over the place. That's the backstory for this exchange. I called him a week before my arrival in New York and told him I was coming in on a business trip and would he be available for dinner on Thursday? And he said, yes. So as I was closing, I said, oh yeah, I'm bringing a date. And I hung up. And he called me right back and he was pissed. As best man at my wedding, he made a toast in which he called me a sticker and was upset that I might be bringing a date, not my wife. I told him who it would be and why, and he was almost speechless. I know, imagine, Charles, speechless. At dinner that Thursday, he and Murley, at a table with me and 3 20-something, very involved African-American persons, carried on the entire conversation. The table was awed. My brother's knowledge of the civil rights movement floored Murley, and afterwards she commented to me privately how impressed she was by his knowledge and compassion regarding the subject. Well, a year later, we did the 60s Chronicle, and I called him up and I said, hey, I'm coming in on business. Would you be available for dinner? And he said, sure, who's your date? And I said, Tom Hayden. We had hired him to do a preface. Once again, nearly speechless, and once again, an amazing dinner. We picked Tom up. I got to call him Tom, at his Greenwich Village hotel, and we went to dinner. Tom was fighting a major cold, and he was slamming down one brandy after another. I'm proud to say I kept up with him, but my choice was Irish whiskey. I don't think I spoke a word. I watched as gawkers from other tables recognized Tom Hayden and listened as he and Charles discussed in no subdued voices the Students for Democratic Society movement, the Chicago 8, the 1968 Democratic Convention debacle, and the trial of 1969. When it was time to leave, Charles excused himself to powder his nose, and Tom looked at me and said, wow, and I'm quoting, your brother is amazing. I told him that Charles had something special in his pocket. I wondered if he'd mind terribly signing it. He said, sure. And as it turned out, it was a copy of the Port Huron statement, which Tom had written. Up comes the inscription. He was surprised, and he happily inscribed this lovely note on the inside cover. I could never have held up my end of a conversation with either Murley Evers or Tom Hayden. To his huge satisfaction, I used my brother. And no doubt, both of those people departed our company thinking I must be a pretty smart guy. And I was. I used my brother. And if that isn't evident, I could go on and on, but I'm not going to. Let's get Mikhail on the horn here. I have a little introduction. Charles and Mikhail is an old, make that ancient or even antediluvian buddy and boon companion to my brother Carlos, a poet and performance artist. They met in New Paltz in their late teens and enjoyed a cherished friendship lasting more than 50 years. Mick?
Hey, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We are hearing you. It's your floor. You got the the video.
You're seeing me?
We see you and we hear you.
Okay.
Let it rip.
Okay,
Let it
great.
rip.
So yes, listen, before I even get started, I just want to say how wonderful it is to hear and feel this outpouring of love for Carlos, who I also knew as Cisco. I was poncho to his Cisco for many years. I thought I knew a lot of stories about him, but the Murley Evers and the Tom Hayden story just take the cake, man. Those were just beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, we met in the glorious 1960s, in 1967 in New Paltz. And then we went to the, we were card carrying members of SDS, I guess. And we also were involved in shutting the school down after the Kent State and Jackson State murders. And we also made it to an event which, in retrospect, was the end of civilization as we know it, the 1969 Woodstock Festival, aboard Carlos's Volkswagen Rosinante, named for Don Quixote's faithful nag. We spent 3 days cavorting naked in the mud, so that was. But we were on opposite sides of one issue, and that was the Shakespeare-Oxford Wars. Carlos was one of those poor, misguided, but nevertheless relentless people who do not believe that William Shakespeare wrote the plays of William Shakespeare. And my response to his incessant proselytizing for the Earl of Oxford was to finally send him one of my homemade Christmas cards depicting the original manuscript for A Visit from St. Nicholas, signed by, whoa, the Earl of Oxford. And this started a whole round of teasing back and forth, where I would try to convince him that the Earl of Oxford was the author of the Gettysburg Address or the Bridges of Madison County, et cetera, et cetera. One of the best days we ever spent together was when we drove Allen Ginsberg home from a reading he gave at Ulster County Community College. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm not sure of the date. And Carlos and Ginsberg talked politics most of the way down. I sat in the back seat taking notes. I had to pee, so we made a pit stop and get out. And I guess during the time I was out of the car, Carlos started telling Alan about a parody I had written of his great poem, Howl. It was more or less if Allen Ginsberg had written Casey at the Bat, what would it sound like? And I get back in the car and Ginsberg wheels around and shakes his finger at me and says, "How dare you parody my poetry?" But for a minute, I was completely nonplussed, but then he demanded to hear it. So I had to, despite my reluctance, recite the entire thing for him by memory. And he sat there scowling, and Carlos was laughing his ass off. But he later told me that it was, he had heard hundreds of parodies of that poem, but mine was the best because I captured his long line biblical cadences. So anyway, for what that's worth. I had some stuff I wrote down. He was also, I got to say, he was also the greatest supporter of my stage act with Gilles Malkin that he produced and paid for. I think he showed me this before. Oh yeah, wait. He produced entirely at his own expense this handsomely packaged. It says, oh yeah, I see it's backwards on here. So it's too small to fail. It was DVD. Oh, it's not. I told you I don't have any tech savvy at all. No. The cat is trying to disconnect us now. So if we go back, he's tugging at the wires. He was always trying to insert himself into our act, however, whether literally, as when he got on stage once to adjust my mic while I was in the middle of one of my monologues. And that's after he assured me that his videotaping would be unobtrusive. Okay? And he was always feeding me stuff that he thought should be in the act. And after shaking him off 1,000 times, I finally took his idea for a Bernie Sanders Let It Be song, which we collaborated on, which begins, "When I find myself in times of trouble, Emma Goldman comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be Bernie." And here's another brilliant piece he contributed. This was one of our news breaks where the newscaster recites this. Dateline Newport Beach. There was a massive solar energy spill off the coast of Newport Beach, California, which prompted the governor to not declare a state of emergency, not ask for federal assistance, and not send volunteers to save the beaches and the aquatic animals. problem solved in 10 minutes by two guys with a $10 circuit breaker. See, he just had a, he used to tell me I was the funniest person he knew, but he was one of the funniest person I knew. He's really just had he could have a very caustic wit, and but it was always right on. I have 1,000 stories I could tell about Carlos, but I just want to end here by saying that he was a gem. He was a giant of generosity, a true blue, unconditionally loyal friend, an indefatigable activist for truth, justice, and the American way. And for the rest of my life, I will miss him every day. Okay, Dougie. Oh, hey, listen. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Ron. Hi, Abby. Hi, Roz. People I haven't seen in a while. Take it away, Doug.
Mick? We're going to give everybody a chance.
Yeah.
Before too long to say hi to each other. We'll open up all the mics, I think.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Great.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, you know what? We have somebody else who wants to speak, but we don't know what name she's hiding under. Tatiana, check your email, get back to me, let me know so we can find you. And I will do my last segment.
I think, Doug,
okay.
I'm sorry, we did have Dwight as well.
Oh, Dwight. Let's get Dwight on right now. Dwight, you're on.
Hi.
Turn on your video, Dwight, if you can.
It says the host has stopped my video. So, okay, let's see if I can
All
start.
right, 1 second. Let me get you turned on.
Okay, here we are. I feel like a latecomer to everything with Charles because I've only known him for about 35 years. And I have to say that Charles is probably the best example of a friend anyone could have. Charles was a colleague, a friend, and the biggest pain in my ass I ever knew. As Doug mentioned, he loved to debate. And a lot of the times, I never knew if he was serious or not. But Charles would always goad me into a debate. And we wound up jumping up and down and yelling at each other. But we always had respect for each other. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the social milieu that we have today. We never shut each other down. One thing that I remember specifically was a New Year's at Charles's apartment. And as everyone knows, Charles was a great cook. And I remember he made a lasagna. Well, the plate was this big. The piece of lasagna he served was this big. And it was absolutely amazing. It was probably the best I ever had. Charles and I met in a kind of roundabout way. Believe it or not, I wound up selling videotape to Alan Epstein. I don't know exactly how Charles was involved in that, but I know Charles and Alan were great friends. And Charles introduced me to many, many of his friends as well, which have been great relationships. Charles actually found our first office of Tobin Productions. I had been working out of my apartment. Excuse me. Things got bigger and bigger, fortunately, and we needed an office. Charles volunteered to search, and that was history. One of my fondest memories was that my wife and I have a house upstate New York in a small town called Cairo. It's spelled like Cairo, Egypt, pronounced Cairo. Well, Charles came up to visit. He was going to spend the weekend, and he arrived early. Well, the house was closed, but he found a ladder under the deck. That's my dog in the background. He found a ladder under the deck, climbed up on the deck, broke in through well, he didn't break in. He slid open the sliding doors. And when my wife and I came home, there was Charles sitting in the kitchen and lunch was prepared. I didn't know what to say at that time. As I said, Charles always kept us on our toes. We worked together on many, many, many projects. He would always try to stretch the limits. He always tried to go one step further than we had planned. And he was usually right. It was a hard road debating with him because, as I said, he always took the opposite stance just to get a reaction. I really can't add too much to anything anyone else has said. Charles was a good friend, always very generous, and always full of surprises. I last spoke with him about a few weeks before he was in the hospital. He never let on that he was ill. I know he said he had some trouble walking. I attribute it to age. I guess he didn't want any of us to worry at that time. But it's always, we never know the last phone call that we'll have with someone. And, you know, as the song goes, you never know what you've got till it's gone. I remember the inscription on the tombstone of one of my family. I can't beat, I've never eaten at McDonald's, but it's very, very appropriate here. And it reads, to live in the hearts of those you leave behind is not to die. Charles will always be alive in my life. And thank you, Doug, for hosting this.
Well, Dwight, that was really lovely. Thank you, and appreciate it. I remember my visits to your office downtown, and your dogs, and all the nice people that were there. It was always a joy to walk in and be so warmly greeted, and I'll always appreciate that. And you're right, he was almost always right, except when he was talking to me. That wasn't always the case. All right, Tatiana, are you available now? Apparently not.
Oh,
There she is. Hi, Tatiana.
Hi.
Paul.
So,
Hello.
So I was also a roommate of Charles's in Spanish Harlem when he lived there. As somebody else said, you know, when you knew Charles, you were part of the family. He felt like a brother to me. He was always watching out for me. You know, he was always there when I needed him. I was going to say that he spoke, you know, I never met you, Doug, but he spoke of you often and of your son. One of the things that Paul and I both liked about Charles was that you could have opposite opinions. You could argue with Charles and you could still be friends. You know, we'd argue it out, we'd have difference in opinion, but we commented on that because it's not the way with most people. So, so we really like that. We visited him Dominican Republic and he found us a place there in the same compound and we had a great time. Let's see, what else was I going to say? Paul commented that when we were watching this commentary, we were thinking that Charles is there saying, "What are you doing? Pull the screen out further. Why are you moving the pictures in and out?" He'd have a lot to say about the production. So anyway, I wanted to tell a story. Charles came to our wedding. And he stood up and did the toast to the bride, and he said that when I went away, I went and traveled around the world, and Charles gave me some advice before I left. He said, and then I came back to see him, and I came back with a young man, and the man was dressed in help me out here, Paul. Dressed in like had a stick, bone through his nose. He had a stick with the shaky thing and kind of stall garb. I can't remember. He had a very descriptive picture of it. And then he said, "No, Tatiana, a rich doctor." So anyways, yes, and when he came to the wedding, he did the toast and he cooked for everybody there. Everybody was very impressed. And he came to visit us in Toronto. He was a very, very good friend, and as a lot of people said, an amazing, amazing person. We're so lucky to have him. Somebody else in the comments of Facebook said, "I wish I had reached out more often." And of course, it's true. I wish I had done that. I wish I had. That's the immediate thought I had. I hadn't talked to him for a while, and I thought, man, I wish I had reached out more often, But he loved to debate with Paul, and but you could just, you could talk, you could debate, and then you could walk away and still be friends. That's all I have to say, but thank you for doing this. It was lovely. Really good.
Well, he certainly loved both of you. Maybe Tatiana, you a little more, but yeah, none of that surprises me at all. He told me a story. He was visiting in France with a friend of his, Isabel. I'm not sure if she's on with us right now. She might be. But he told me that they traveled down to the south of France together to visit her family, where he was really warmly greeted, and he just really bonded and loved being there. And one night he offered to cook. He told me that he had never met a family of French people where no one could cook. But apparently they didn't. So he made a dish. I don't know the name of the dish, but it involved a rabbit. And they all ate, and everybody seemed to enjoy his meal, which isn't unusual because everybody enjoyed pretty much any meal that he made. He was a fabulous chef. But the next day they were in the village, and they met up with some neighbors who invited them all to dinner, and they went to dinner where the family served the meal Charles had made the night before. No one said a word. Everybody enjoyed the meal. And on the walk back, somebody said, "Yours was better." So I hadn't included that in what I planned to say, but it seemed like something to add to what you were talking about, because he loved to cook. He certainly did. I see Ed Fabre wants to say hello. Ed, do you want to jump in?
I'll add him. Just 1 second.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't see a note, Catherine. Yes.
Ed, can you see that request to join? There he is. He should be joining us. There he is.
There he is. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, I didn't realize I had to be invited as a panelist. I've been to a few of these Zoom memorials, and this one is so good, which is a testament to Charles, to the range of friendships he had and the depth of many of them. And I met him in the mid 80s and continued to see him with a few breaks up until quite recently. During the pandemic, we probably spoke a couple times a week. Because back then, especially him, especially people who were kind of homebound, were desperate for connection. And every time we talked, he would end the conversation by saying, "This is good for me." And it was good for me too, because, and this is the thing I'll miss, one of the things I'll miss most about him, is that I don't have anyone else in my life that I can have these types of conversations with, because of the intelligence of the guy and the breadth of his knowledge. And as Doug, I met Doug for the first time when I went to the hospital to see Charles for the last time. And the story you told about sometime in the 60s, there was some issue he wanted to talk about. And he said, "This is the question. Let's debate. You can take either side." I've told that story to many people since, because that's a quality of enjoying communication and the exploration or the search for knowledge almost for its own sake. And that's very, I'm very much like that, and that's a hard thing to come by. And I just did a job in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago, and after the job, I drove out to the Outer Banks and had a great time hiking all over the place, and then stopped at the Wright Brothers Museum and their airstrip, and then went to Jamestown on the way back. And I thought that if Charles were still alive, I would have spent, half of this 7-hour drive on the phone with him. I know no one else who I know would have known so much about the subjects and would have been interested in debating all the nuances of what the meanings of things or what other alternative histories could have come out of that moment. And many times when I'd be driving up to New Paltz or someplace to go hiking, he would be, along with a handful of other people, my mother, one of my brothers, he'd be a person I'd almost always check in with just for the pure joy of conversation. And I'm going to miss that. We had some interesting adventures because I met him through Alan Epstein in the mid-'80s. And at first it was a bit contentious on his part because he saw me as a competitor, even though we did totally different things. But as someone suggested, he was a sort of a competitive aspect to him, which brought out good qualities too. And yet, despite that, I stayed friends with him all the time because the value and the uniqueness of our connection and the things we were able to talk about outweighed everything else. And I look forward to reading his memoirs. I hope you can publish them to some degree, because all these stories, I've heard many of these stories people are telling them, but to hear them from different perspectives, and maybe people who knew them more, is just fantastic. So thanks for doing this, Doug. It's a fitting tribute to an excellent man.
Thank you, Ed. It was really nice meeting you while I was in New York. Would have been better under other circumstances. But I really appreciated that you came by and the time we spent. Regarding the memoirs, it's on my list, but they require some work, and I'll see what I can do about that. Okay, I don't think, was there anyone else who wanted to jump on? Does everyone know that there's a button on their screen called chat, and on the right-hand side of your screen, you might be able to see a running chat between participants and comments, etc.
Yes, if anyone would like to speak, just reply to everyone and I can add you as a panelist.
Yeah, do you see Jean Murrow would like to get on board?
Yes.
Let's go with Jean right now.
Luckily, there are so many people here that it's actually takes a minute to scroll and find
Everybody, but you're doing great, and I so appreciate everything you're doing. It made everything so easy for me.
No problem.
Hey, Gene.
Hi everyone. Hi, Doug. I knew Chuck from high school, so I guess we've been friends for 60 years or so. This is my partner, Ann, here. We've enjoyed many dinners at Chuck's apartment with fellow Ardsleians who are also on this call. I just wanted to add another chapter to his argumentativeness, helpfulness, and generosity. When my organization, which produces classical music concerts in New York, was hit by the pandemic a couple of years ago and we were all out of business, we decided we would have to do our concerts on video and live stream them. The first one we did is I just took out my iPhone and we just held it up, and the duo, gamba and harpsichord, played a concert in their apartment, and I recorded it on my iPhone and sent it out over the airwaves. And the next thing I did was call Chuck and say, it looks like we're into this video business. Well, that's all I needed to do to ignite the fire of his endless stream of texts and emails, advising me on how to proceed from that point on over the next, it's now been 2 years and some months. Every single time, we kept adding equipment. A few months ago, I went to his apartment. He was starting to deaccession things, and he gave us, just out of the goodness of his heart, he gave us some equipment he had no longer been using. I guess Dwight would know about some of these things, but he had some wonderful wireless microphones and some lights and light stands and things. So we we had that and we added that to our kit. And our videos got better and better. But after every single one, we'd be exhausted having done this whole live stream, live TV with lighting and 4 cameras and microphones and this whole. And after every single one, the phone would ring and I knew it was Chuck. And I'd pick up my cell phone and he'd say, okay, here's what was wrong with that video. That first shot should have been tighter and the audio was no good on the on this and that. So it was very helpful. And then, as Doug knows, I went to visit him at the hospital after he was admitted and said my goodbyes. And then I got a call from Doug a couple of weeks ago saying there was some more video equipment in his apartment and did I want it? And I said, I'm not so sure, but I'll come down. And so so I went down to Chuck's apartment where Doug and his wife were, and we just, it was a couple of cases of things and a whole bunch of other equipment, which right now is sitting in my basement. Some of it we've already begun using. And so, as someone said, Chuck, he's going to live on in our hearts, and he's going to live on in my basement and in every single video production we do from now on. It's just, we could not have done it without Chuck.
To be acknowledged.
And we did. I don't know if any of you do tune into it. If you go to YouTube and you go to Midtown Concerts channel and watch any of our videos, at the end of the video, we do have a credit slide, and we have, since Chuck's death, we've put in remembrance of our good friend Chuck Fernandez, 1946 to 2022. So he lives on in the credits as well. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Doug.
Well, thank you, Gene. All that equipment, it may be old, but a lot of it's still useful.
Yeah.
And we just get the best use out of it. He would be so happy to know that. But I'm a little concerned the idea of him living on forever in people's basements. I'm just not sure that that's a good thing. Okay. Okay. Catherine, do you have Ron found?
I sure do. Let me turn.
Okay, let's bring Ron up. Pete Sessa, you'll go next. Ron?
Hi. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Turn on your video.
It won't let me. It said the host asked you. Okay. All right. Let me try again. There we go. Hi. Well, thank you for organizing this. I wanted to relay a few anecdotes from our past history. I, like Mikhail, also met Carlos in 1967, so we've known each other for almost 55 years. I met him because I was trying to get politically more active as an incoming freshman, and I met Carlos, who introduced me to SDS. It's there that I met Harold Channer, and then the Channer family, and the rest is kind of history. I'm going to try not to be redundant because we spoke about his high intelligence, his ability to debate, his generosity, which knew no bounds. He gave willingly. Sometimes it wasn't always reciprocated by those he gave to. But what I want to touch on is his great organizing skills. To have known Carlos was to know one of the best organizers there was. Whether it was organizing a touch football game on the college quad, or buses to take us to the anti-war protests in Washington, teach-ins during the student strikes on campus, or dinners for all the tribes people who frequented the Channer's house. Carlos was a consummate organizer. Two specific examples stand out. Harold and Eileen Channer lived in a college-owned house at 2 College Avenue, where Carlos and I, along with numerous other hippies of the day, would frequent. It's fair to say we practically lived there. Downstairs in the basement were housed by the college over 50 dormitory mattresses piled up for storage. Carlos organized a team to reposition those mattresses around the perimeter of that basement, and we turned the Channer house into a hippie crash pad / den of iniquity. Word got out. Strangers from all over the country would mysteriously appear at the Channer house. For example, one night, this long-haired stranger from somewhere in Colorado showed up, and he said that his friend Aardvark told him he could crash here. I would say that Carlos might be credited with having created the first subterranean Airbnb. The second example involved organizing a New Paltz contingent group at the 1969 Woodstock Festival, along with Harold and Eileen. Having chosen a perfectly situated campsite right next to the hog farm commune, where we were provided with food during the festival, Carlos and his compatriots erected a long tent made out of plastic in a kind of a lean-to, and in red electrical tape spelled New Paltz so that it would be easily found by those people who were in attendance. We all slept in a solid row of bodies pushed up against one another in a line, where we stayed relatively dry even after the rains came. He and the Channers also had a giant red balloon that floated over the festival so that the New Paltz contingent could find each other in the crowd. About the only thing that Carlos tried to organize that didn't turn out that great was the Pine Bush Commune, but c'est la vie, as they say. Carlos, well, I didn't see Carlos for many years because Margie and I were busy raising kids and working, but we kind of reconnected in later years, much because of his visits to New Paltz, mostly to see Mick and Gilles perform. But as the years have gone on, there were more frequent phone calls where we would discuss, we would debate, we would exchange political ideas, songs that we wrote, critiquing editorials, etc., and so forth. I'm going to miss him greatly. I'm somewhere in the cosmos. He's there, hoping that he's listening to all of this. And while it's not easy to say goodbye, I will say auf Wiedersehen until we meet again.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was fabulous.
I'll send you a copy of what I wrote for you.
Thank you.
And this is over, so you'll have it.
Thank you. I'll comment. Charles and I lived two places together in the New Paltz area. One was on Pencil Hill, and we occupied that home for a little while before Harold and Eileen and their two children moved in on us. I fell in love with Eileen instantly. She was such a winner. And I just remember staring at Harold in awe most of the time. He was even a bigger character. And their two children were very young, very cute, and always naked, running around. Well, I left within weeks, I was gone. And I don't think Charles lasted too much longer. He and I also lived in a place over in Rosendale. We shared a stable hands apartment above A.J. Schneider's cement estate stables. So people over in Rosendale would remember that in the wintertime, he would A.J., very old man at the time, would saddle up his horse and to a sleigh and ride through Rosendale when it was snowing. But a friend of mine, Steve Kluge, came to visit, and we were fast asleep when all of a sudden he's at my bedside, shaking me, screaming, "Earthquake," because the horse was rolling over and to make space in his stable, kicking against the wooden walls, and the whole house was shaking. And just like anything else, I guess you get used to it, and that happens. And with the mattresses, he actually offered me mattresses. Friends of mine, we rented a huge house in High Falls. As the owner, Joe, once said, it's a virtual paradise or castle or whatever he said. It was great. But we took on about a dozen or so mattresses, rolled back the really ugly shag carpet in our living room, laid them out, put the shag on top, and had the very same experiences that you talked about. And at Woodstock, on August 16th, 1969, my brother's birthday, I pointed my camera up at a balloon floating over the crowd, and the balloon said, "Peace, New Paltz." And I was able to follow the string down, and who was holding it but my brother. It took about an hour to get to him, and he was absolutely shocked that I found him. I wish him a happy birthday. I appreciate you sparking those memories. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to introduce my cousin, Pete Sessa. Pete goes back a long way because he's a first cousin and one that we grew up with. He and his brother Jay. And Pete's chimed in that he'd like to say a few words. So go for it, cuz.
Unmute.
Okay, we're just starting to hear you now.
Okay. First of all, Doug, thanks for putting all this together. You did a really great job, as that does not surprise me. Charles and Doug and I are cousins. Our mothers were sisters. And Charles was the older cousin by quite a few years. To us, it seemed like forever, 5 years approximately, right? And he had a very positive influence on my life. My family, my side of the family, were not big travelers at all. And his weekly at our family dinners at our Nana's house, Sunday dinners, he would often tell his travel stories, even as a younger man. And it really, his stories inspired me. And it kind of culminated, we were laughing about it not too long ago, that when I heard his story about Pamplona, I couldn't believe it. Running with the Bulls, what are you, crazy? So, of course, Stupid here does it, 5, 6 years later. Get stepped on a few times, but otherwise I'm still here. But it was such an unusual story to hear from my neighborhood in Brooklyn at that time. People just weren't doing the things that he was doing. The second thing was that his politics and his insight were also very instructive and inspirational to me. And I have since spent a career working in the social justice arena very heavily, which Charles and I have talked about quite often. I want to just thank Doug for caring for him in his time of need, and for being the great brother that he was to Charles. And that's not always something people have. And I know Charles was very loved his brother and was very appreciative of all of their relationship. We had spoken weekly in the last few years, partially because of the pandemic, and we were both locked in, so to speak. But we spoke. And I just wanted to say he spoke very highly of his family. And listening to all of you, I've heard many of your names, and he was very, very appreciative of his friends and what they brought to the table. And he was a good man and cousin, and he'll be missed, but he lives on. Thank you, Doug, for the time.
Hopefully not in your basement. Really nice, Pete. Glad to see you. See your mug here today, and we'll have to talk. He loved talking with you. He would ask me, "Oh, have you and Pete talked lately?" And no, not for a while. Well, you ought to call him. He's a nice guy. Stuff like that. It was really special. So, yeah, thanks. Looks like Francine has added her desire. I hope I'm noticing a few people are bailing because of the time, and that's fine. If you need to go, but I'm going to continue this until we're done.
We had David Channer next, and then Francine, I think.
Oh, I didn't see David. Yeah, please put David on. This is one of the Channer's little children running around naked on Pencil Hill coming up. Hopefully he'll be closed.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the video to start.
Right. Hi, David. It's nice to see you. Almost.
Nice to see you too, Doug. Thank you for doing this. There it goes. Thank you for that invitation. I put on clothes because I'm not as cute naked as I used to be. But I really appreciate this memorial, and I wanted to say something about Carlos. I knew him as Carlos my whole life, and still getting used to all the other names. But as Lauren mentioned earlier, and others have said as well, we had a very rich and character-filled life growing up, which I think we treasure. I think of Lisa, my sister Lisa, who's on this call, and Lauren as my siblings growing up through this. And we had this treasured mosaic of characters. And we also, our family split up when we were very young. So each of our parents held this beautiful history with us and for us in their own way, and both were connected. But at least for me, and I think this is true of my sister as well, the connection between those two different versions was a little bit tenuous because our parents didn't have much to do with each other after a certain time. And that's a whole other long story. But Carlos was one of the people who was a real conduit, for me anyway, in understanding that history that for my young naked child's mind was a little bit blurry. And he was one of the people that could fully appreciate each of our parents in their own way, fully appreciate the turmoil of those times and of our own family story and of the extended family story, but also really represent the beauty of it all. And it was a very valuable thing for me growing up to know him and to have people like him. Margie and Ronnie were like that. Alan Epstein was like that. All of our extended family could hold it for us in some way. But Carlos was someone who had ongoing contact with my father and my mother. I spoke to him a few times during the pandemic about this, and we touched on it. I got to see him a few years ago for the first time in a while. It was really lovely. And his ability to hold a history with such tenderness for all the people in it and have little artifacts that he could go and point to, knew exactly where it was, and he could tell you what happened on that day, and I took that photo. And, he just had a beautiful spirit about that. Regarding the commune that Ronnie touched on really quickly, what our mother told us growing up was that everyone on the commune, of course, she loved, but she said that George Tuckle and Carlos were kind of the only people who ever did anything to fix the place up. She said that Carlos was very practical, very organized, very responsible, and that she and George and Carlos were out there trying to work and hang sheetrock and bang nails while others were like, mostly getting high and staring up at the clouds and things. I don't know if that's true. I cannot corroborate it now, but anyone can feel free to push back on that. Mostly, I wanted to say that in a world that was of a particular time for a particular set of people and an iconic moment in history, he had a really lovely glue and a way of coming at people with a tenderness and a warmth and a capacity to remember and hold people. And so I'm really grateful to be part of remembering him today. And it's touching to honor him. It's also touching to reconnect with so many of you, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
David, thank you. Thank you. You made me remember. Everybody who's saying things is reminding me of moments when his life and mine touched after we left Ardsley. And I remember him talking about your dad's local channel TV show in New York. And he went on as a guest one time and went home having said almost nothing the whole time. Because
there's a large group of people that could say that.
Yeah, right. He could certainly fill the room. So yeah, that was great. Thank you very much. I've been asked if I could summarize the number of participants in different countries, and the answer is yes, but not right now. I'm going to make just one more bulk email and post on the various Facebook pages, and that will be to thank all of you for joining us and a summary of exactly that. I just don't have the information in front of me at the moment. Okay, and let's see, who else is there?
I think Francine should be joining us.
Francine, come on board. There she is. We can't hear you, Francine. You need to turn on your microphone. Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've had the privilege of spanning 61 years of friendship with Charles, who, as you mentioned, we started out as Chuck. And I will also take full credit for entering him into New Paltz. We kind of discovered New Paltz together when we were still in high school, and I started attending, and he visited and loved it, and the rest is history. You know, he had a long stay at New Paltz, and I don't want to reiterate all that's been said, but what a wonderful friend. We were great travel partners as well. And one of the things, we had gone to Europe together, but the best trip was when we went to Cuba in 2001, and we discovered my extended family there in Cienfuegos. And although we both took Spanish from Senora Palacios in high school, I was a poor Spanish speaker, and he was excellent. Although he sounded very gringo, he was quite fluent. And he was the translator for me and my family. It was very rich. It was wonderful. They were all in their 60s and 70s, and we just had a wonderful, 5 days with them. The other thing I wanted to mention was for most of my adult life, Charles would call my dad because he was a D-Day hero, and Charles was such a history buff that they would get on the phone. He would call to thank my father. It was so warm and genuine. And they would get on the phone and just talk history. And it was wonderful. And then when my father did pass, he continued that and called my mother to thank her for my dad's contribution during D-Day. And when my mom passed, she started to call me on D-Day. It was very extraordinary. And again, we had so many wonderful meals, discussions, telephone conversations. I'm very excited that I made the list of one of his favorite conversationalists on the telephone. So that was a feather for me.
Yet another list.
Yeah, he was such an intriguing person, just well-versed in every area, every subject. So I miss him. I miss those conversations. I'll miss meeting him in New York. We did a lot of plays and fabulous restaurants. It was just a marvelous friendship for a lifetime. And I thank you so much for this. This has been very rich.
Well, Francine, he talked about you often, and he talked to me about your dad.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes.
And I believe there was a follow-up trip to the beaches.
Yes.
For your dad. And am I correct that your dad was, I don't know what age he was, but he was not a kid and he was climbing the walls again?
Oh, he was in his 60s, and he had practiced up against the, using pitons or whatever, up against the garage wall in Florida. And then he made that, and he wasn't supposed to, but he was the old guy that made it on French TV, and he was acclaimed. It was wonderful.
Charles was very proud of him for that. Whether he had the right to be proud or not, he talked about it frequently.
Oh, he just embraced my dad like he was his own. Yeah. And my mom too. He just adored my parents and cooked for them. Every time he came to Florida, he'd make these gargantuan, beautiful, sumptuous dinners. It was wonderful.
Yep, he loved to do that. Well, thank you. It's great to see you.
All right.
Great to see you. Okay. Okay. Well, back to me. We'll wind down a little bit. I'd like to close this with two of my favorite stories that really defined my brothers and my friendship and camaraderie. And they revolve around our mother. When our mother was turning 90, we wanted to do something special. we reached out to everyone we knew, asking them to send her a birthday card or a picture postcard, wishing her a milestone birthday. And we asked that the postcards be just anything, travel related, nice pictures, funny, or even risque. We asked our contacts to even ask their contacts around the world to send a card. And we promised that even if they had never met, she would remember them fondly. As an example of that, I sent one to her of a famous Havana, Cuba hotel where she and I had visited when I was 5 years old. That's a whole nother story I won't tell right now. And I signed it from Raul Castro, suggesting that they had had a fabulous night there. Mom smiled when she read that postcard and said, "Oh, yes, I remember that night." She received nearly 400 postcards and greeting cards for her birthday from around the globe. The mailman to the building insisted on hand delivering them. When they became so numerous, he wanted to meet the woman who knows everybody. And during her last 2 years, she would take a handful out of a basket each day and review them. They really made her happy. And thank you to any of you who participated in that. It was a worthwhile effort, and you have our gratitude. When our mother died in 2011, we decided that it would be fun to pay tribute to her and the fact that she loved to travel. So we decided we were going to scatter her ashes around the globe. I don't say world, I always say globe, because globes are round and there's still flat earthers out there. Anyways, we just didn't see any reason why her death should stop her from traveling. There were so many places that she would have liked to travel. We worked on this for several years with great success by, again, oh, you know what? I have tons of pictures. I'm going to start clicking through them. And I'll even tell you where some of these are. I think this is Barcelona. This is out in South Dakota at Custer's Park. One place she never wanted to go to, although she might have with recent history, is Disney down in Orlando. Here he is. I'm sorry you can't see him quite, but here he is at the Eiffel Tower. I'll interject this one when he ran for mayor of New Paltz. This one was in Texas in the mountain range, and this is at the Saguaro Cactus National Park. And I'm not sure where this took place, but it looks like Florida. And I'm going to stop for a moment and get back to my story because of what comes up next. Anyways, we realized there was one place that she hadn't been to, one continent, I should say, that she hadn't made it to, Antarctica. And Charles asked me, how are we going to pull that off? And I said, no problem, I'll take care of it. And I really had no idea how I was going to pull it off. So I posted on Facebook and I asked if anyone was planning a trip to Antarctica. And less than an hour later, a New Paltz friend of his and mine, my brother, said, my brother-in-law is going next week. What's up? I got in touch personally, said if he would be upset by doing such a thing, we understand. And she said, no, right up his dark sense of humor, he'll be happy. And here he is in Port Lockroy, Antarctica, with penguins looking on, scattering our mom's ashes and making it so she's traveled to all the continents on this globe. So where else? Well, this is a bust of Karl Marx. He's up there on top of the concrete. And this is, well, I don't know where that one is. This is the Rio Grande. I think we're on the United States side. This is Machu Picchu. I recognize that woman. This is Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Our friend Erla in Venice, helping out. And there you go. It was just such a fun thing to be doing. And, again, all we can do is thank anybody who participated and helped us get there. So my final story, oh wait, did I say two? Well, when our mother died, she left us a simple will. To my boys, 50-50. If you can't figure it out, sell it, burn it, give it away, divide everything 50-50. It was really that simple, and that's exactly who she was. We argued over only one item, and that was her car. And we argued for weeks about who should get the car. And finally, I won. He got the car because he felt I should have it, and I felt he should have it. And neither one of us wanted to burn it. And that's how it was with us. I don't believe we ever shared a selfish moment. And I'm going to miss him forever. Okay, folks, here we go. I need to thank Daniel and Bobby, Ed, Jim, Mick, and the add-on speakers. Thank you so much for taking time to share your thoughts and memories. It really did a lot for me. I thank all of his friends and mine who took time to visit today. I need to thank everyone who either called or visited Charles during his final weeks. Let everyone else know it's okay that you didn't know. I didn't broadcast it. It was not a good 3 weeks. And for 2 of them, we thought he was going home. So it was only in the end, the last week, that the writing was on the wall. I also want to thank everyone who called me or has reached out to me since personally. It really meant a lot. And I invite you, if you have any stories, don't wait, sit down, send them to me, please. I really will appreciate them. Your kind gestures. Thank you. Okay. That's really the end of what I've put together for today. I would ask Catherine, are you able to just open the whole thing up if anybody wants to like call out and say, hey, Francine, how you doing? It's Ron.
I'm so sorry. It turns out because this is a webinar and not a regular Zoom meeting, I'm unable to do that. So if anyone else wants to speak, they should let me know right now in the chat. But I'm very sorry. I know folks wanted to chat, but it's
no problem. You know, we live with the rules and regulations that are foisted upon us, and that's appreciated for sure. Oh, look at that meal. So I guess that's it, folks. I thought we'd go about an hour, hour and 15. Added speakers, we're pushing 2 hours. I think our numbers went up close to 100 participants, and some have had to bow out. So like I said, I will send another note. And okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Catherine, if you want to end this meeting.